not too bad for 60 years old. It still looks pretty good, you know. In 1957, I was working at General Motors, and I'd spent my time in the library at that time that was just being built. It was brand new, and nothing was really too organized. And I found a set of mimeograph sheets in there that had actually been a copy of some work that had been done in the early 1930s on aerodynamic design in Germany. I couldn't read the German, but I could look at the numbers, and I was pretty impressed with what they had done. And it was unlike anything that we were conventional, because most aerodynamic design at that time had been pretty much based on a teardrop shape. That was considered the ideal shape for aerodynamics. But this idea went with a flat roof with a chopped off back end, and but the numbers were pretty impressive. So I looked at all those numbers and kept those things in my mind. So when the opportunity came up with Carroll Shelby, we had an opportunity to put a new body on the existing Cobra Roadster, because the Cobra Roadster only had a top speed of about 160 miles an hour. But the rules were that you could change the body, but not the chassis. So I looked at that opportunity and said, you know, all we need to do is make this thing slippery, and we've got enough horsepower, we know it's going to work. But the thing was so strange looking with the chopped off tail and the funny looking flat roof that went forward instead of back down, that and I'm working with a lot of very, very good top racers at Shelby, American guys, very, very respected, and nobody had any idea that this was going to work. So it was difficult getting the idea across to do that. But with no other opportunity, we didn't have any backing from Ford Motor Company at that time. Carroll convinced the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company to put up the money to build the car. So the first Daytona Coupe was built by Goodyear money. And it was a tremendous advantage for Goodyear, because it showed their ideas about investigating new ideas in automobile design. And of course the press picked it up, and it became very controversial until we ran the car. And then the car was so successful when we first had it out, we took it to Daytona. And we had two brand new guys in it that had never driven it, Dave McDonald and Bob Holbert. And they went out on the track, and they came in after 2 or 3 laps, and they said, you know, this is ridiculous. We're just running off from the Ferraris. Let's cut the RPM down. And we did that twice, 500 times, 500 down. So we had the RPM down. Now we were just exactly at the same speed as the Ferraris that were running out there. So we said, let's do a check on our fuel. We were 25% better fuel efficiency with that shape. So we said, okay, our way to run the races, we'll run parallel with the Ferraris, and when they pit, we can go 2 more laps, and that's how we're going to run the race. So, and at every track that we ran that year, the car broke the lap record, and sometimes with a different driver. You know, we had Joe Schlesser in the car at Le Mans, we had Phil Hill on the car at Spa. So each time we took the car out, it broke the lap record. So, and we hadn't really done any development on the car. This is pretty much out of the box. The only thing that we found out is it had some lift at the back end, and I knew that it was going to have that on it, and I designed it with a wing on the back end, but that was so controversial at the time that it was even more controversial in the shape of the back end chopped off, because it went up over the back and had a movable wing, and everybody thought that was just too fanciful and it wouldn't work. But by the time we got to Spa and Phil got in the car, and he said, you know, this thing is almost undrivable, because we were going over the tops of rigid 170, 180 miles an hour, and the car was getting really sideways. And so he came in, and Phil Remington, our chief engineer, we had a little piece of aluminum, cut it into 4 strips, put it across the back end. We made a spoiler on the car, very, very rudimentary. Triangulated it with a couple of pieces of welding rod, and went out there and again broke the lap record on it, and said, okay, that's it. So that became our rear spoiler. So the car never did get built with the wing on the back the way I wanted, but the rear spoiler was so effective that we didn't need to do any more. The thing that was so radically opposed on this particular car was this comparatively flat-looking roof line. You know, prior to this car, Most cars came down to a point in the back end because that was sort of the accepted, fish-like or raindrop type shape. But the problem is that once the air doesn't stay attached to the surface, it begins to turbulate. So if you had a roof line that breaks away up here and comes down to a point in the back end, you begin turbulence all the way down, and that creates drag. So the idea with this car is to keep the roof line as flat as possible so the air stays attached and it gets back to the back end, and you simply chop it off, and essentially you're fooling the wind and making the car a lot faster. So that's where the back end came off. And this was all figured out by a young kid named Reinhard König von Faschenfeld. And he tried to get a patent on it in 1937. He hadn't finished school yet, and they wouldn't give it to him. So he went to work for the German government for Dr. Wunderbaum Kamm, and they developed 2 or 3 different cars with this chopped off back end and did some really, really interesting stuff. And the war came along, nobody ever really learned what they did. And that information was lost till I rediscovered it and put it into use on the Daytona, and all became. Now, so if you look at, for example, a new Honda Prius, exactly the same shape, round in the front, chopped off in the back. So this car completely changed people's thinking about how to get a car more efficient. So that's why racing really makes some things interesting. We ran, I think, our best race in 1964. We had Bob Bondurant and Dad Gurney drove the car, and we won Le Mans with it at the GT race there, which is the first time that anybody had beaten Ferrari. So it was a total reversal on it. So that was sort of the beginning of the way the car came about.